He was a man of God. Or at least that was what people called him. Pastor Jonathan had built a name for himself in the city. Every Sunday, people filled his church until there was no space left to sit. He preached with fire, he prayed with passion, and he looked the part of a successful man of God. Sharp suits, polished shoes, expensive perfumes. Everything about him said, greatness. But deep inside Jonathan, there was a hunger that went beyond the pulpit. He didn't just want to be respected as a pastor. He wanted to be admired as a man. He wanted people to look at him and see a perfect life, a perfect family, and a perfect wife. He often told his friends, "A pastor's wife is not just a helper. She is the face of the ministry. If she does not look good, the ministry will not look good." Those words came from his heart. He wanted a wife who would shine beside him like a trophy, someone people would envy when she walked into church. When it was time to marry, Jonathan did not choose based on humility or quiet strength. He wanted beauty, elegance, and class. He wanted a woman who could carry everything, a woman whose looks could silence critics before he even opened his Bible. And so he chose Miriam. Miriam was beautiful, no doubt. Her skin glowed, her smile could light up a room, and her figure turned heads wherever she went. But more than that, she was soft-spoken and kind, the kind of woman who would support her husband's dreams without question. To everyone else she was a blessing. To Jonathan she was an investment. From the very first day of their marriage, Jonathan made his expectations clear. "You are now a pastor's wife," he said, looking at her like a jeweler admiring a diamond. "You must always look the part. You must be beautiful, graceful, and flawless. The church is watching us." Miriam smiled and nodded. She loved her husband and she wanted to make him proud. She didn't know that his words would become chains around her neck. First, things were sweet. Jonathan paraded her around the church, introducing her to everyone. "This is my jewel," he would say proudly, and Miriam would blush. She felt special, chosen, loved. But soon the pressure began. If she gained even a little weight, Jonathan would frown. "Miriam, people are watching. You cannot look like an ordinary woman. You are not just my wife. You are the wife of a pastor." If her hair was not perfectly styled, he would remind her that the women in the church looked up to her. "You must set the standard," he would insist. When she became pregnant with their first child, Miriam thought things would change. She believed Jonathan would finally see her as more than just an image to polish. But even during pregnancy, he reminded her constantly about her looks. "Don't let yourself go," he would say. "Remember, after this child you must bounce back. My ministry depends on it." Miriam would smile, though her heart grew heavy. She loved Jonathan, but she began to feel like she was no longer a woman. She was a picture frame, something to decorate his life. After the baby was born, Miriam's body naturally changed. She carried the marks of motherhood, the weight of sleepless nights, and the softness that comes after childbirth. She thought Jonathan would hold her close, grateful for the sacrifice she made to bring life into the world. Instead, he looked at her with disappointment. "This is not the woman I married," he whispered one night, his words cutting her deeper than any knife. Miriam cried silently, holding her baby in her arms. She wanted to be enough for him, but it seemed no matter what she did, Jonathan always wanted more. And in his desire for more, Jonathan would eventually push Miriam down a path that would cost her everything. Every time she cradled her baby, she felt whole. But every time Jonathan looked at her, she felt broken. "Have you looked at yourself in the mirror?" he asked one evening as she sat feeding the baby. His tone was casual, but the sting was sharp. "You need to work on yourself, Miriam. People will soon start asking questions." She wanted to shout, "I just gave you a child. I risked my life for this baby." But the words never left her lips. Instead, she swallowed her pain, smiled faintly, and said, "Yes, my husband." Jonathan had built an image of what a pastor's wife should be, and Miriam was trapped inside it. Every Sunday, even while still recovering, he expected her to sit in church with perfect hair and a forced smile. She would sit in the front row, hiding her exhaustion, pretending that all was well. But when she returned home, the reality was different. She was tired, overwhelmed, and silently drowning in the weight of expectations. The mirror became her enemy. In the quiet of the night, after putting the baby to sleep, Miriam would sometimes stand in front of the mirror. She would look at her reflection and struggle to recognize the woman staring back. Her eyes were puffy from lack of sleep, her waist was wider than before, and her figure, once admired by many, was no longer the same. Tears would stream down her cheeks as she whispered to herself, "Is this why he no longer looks at me the same way? Am I not enough anymore?" The mirror, once her friend, became her enemy. Instead of celebrating motherhood, Miriam began to see herself through the lens of Jonathan's disappointment. The pressure of appearances. In church, the women admired Jonathan's sermons, but secretly, they admired Miriam too. They looked at her beauty and elegance, never realizing the storm raging behind her smile. "Pastor's wife, you always look so lovely," they would say. Miriam would force a smile and reply, "By God's grace." But inside she felt like a lie. She was struggling, hurting, and desperate for her husband to love her beyond the surface. Jonathan, however, didn't notice her silent cry. Instead, he started hinting about solutions. "There are doctors who can help Miriam," he told her one night. "These days, women fix their bodies quickly. You don't need to carry these marks forever. The ministry is growing, and I need you to look the part." At first, Miriam was shocked. Surgery? For her body? She had never thought of such a thing. She believed beauty was natural, a gift from God, not something to be cut and stitched. But Jonathan's words planted a seed in her mind, a seed watered by his constant pressure. Months passed, and Miriam tried to lose weight naturally. She dieted, exercised, and forced herself to smile when Jonathan praised other women's appearances. But no matter what she did, it was never enough for him. One day, as she prepared for a church conference, she overheard Jonathan on the phone with another pastor. "Yes, my wife is beautiful," he said with pride. "But after childbirth, we are working on fixing it. Soon she will be back in shape." Miriam froze. His words cut deep. She was no longer just his wife. She was a project, something to be fixed. That night, Jonathan brought it up again. "There is a doctor in the city who does body lifts. Very safe. Many women have done it. I will pay for it. Think about it." Miriam looked at him, her eyes full of questions. "Am I not enough for you the way I am? Will you only love me if I change?" But she didn't ask. She knew the answer. Out of love, or perhaps out of fear of losing him, Miriam agreed. As the surgery date drew closer, Miriam became quieter. She still smiled in public, still played the role of the perfect wife, but inside she was terrified. What if something went wrong? What if she never woke up from the operation? What if she lost her life chasing her husband's approval? She prayed silently at night. "Lord, give me strength. Help me be enough for him." But even as she prayed, her heart knew the truth. Jonathan didn't want the Miriam who prayed. He wanted the Miriam who sparkled. On the morning of the surgery, Jonathan held her hand and said, "You will come out shining again. This is for us, for the ministry." Miriam nodded weakly, tears in her eyes. She wanted to believe this was love, but deep down she knew it was control. And as the hospital doors closed behind her, Miriam's journey into silent sacrifice had only just begun. When the nurses came to wheel her away, Miriam felt her throat tighten. The bright lights of the operating theater blinded her. The room smelled of antiseptic, cold and unfriendly. The machines beeped softly, and the doctors prepared their instruments. "Don't worry, Mrs. Jonathan," the surgeon said. "This is a common procedure. You will be fine." But Miriam's heart whispered otherwise. She closed her eyes and whispered a prayer. "Lord, if this is not my time, please keep me safe." As the anesthesia flowed into her veins, the world around her faded into darkness. Jonathan's waiting game. While Miriam was under the knife, Jonathan paced the hospital corridor. His phone never stopped buzzing. Calls from church elders, messages from pastors, even followers on social media checking on First Lady. He answered each one with confidence. "Yes, she's just having a small procedure," he said casually. "When you see her on Sunday, you will understand. Our God is a God of perfection." His words sounded holy, but his heart was far from God. This was not about health. This was not about healing. This was about image. Hours later, the surgeon came out and said, "The surgery went well. She needs time to recover, but everything looks successful." Jonathan sighed in relief, but not because of Miriam's safety. His relief came from knowing his investment had not failed. Miriam woke up in pain. Her body ached in ways she could not describe. Every movement was agony, every breath a reminder of what she had done. Bandages wrapped tightly around her body, and the doctors instructed her to stay in bed for weeks. When Jonathan walked into the recovery room, she tried to smile, but tears slipped down her cheeks. "It hurts," she whispered. "Of course it hurts," Jonathan replied, adjusting his suit jacket. "But beauty comes with pain. You will thank me later." Those words pierced her heart. She had hoped for compassion, for a gentle hand to wipe her tears, but instead, she was reminded once again that her worth lay in appearances. Weeks later, Miriam returned to church. The transformation was clear. Her figure was back, curves in the right places, waist trimmed, body shaped in a way that made people whisper in admiration. As she walked into the sanctuary, heads turned. The women gasped softly. The men looked twice. Jonathan smiled proudly. "Church," he announced from the pulpit that Sunday, "look at my wife, the jewel God has given me. Is she not a testimony of excellence?" The congregation clapped, and Miriam smiled weakly. Outwardly she looked perfect. Inwardly she was broken. Because while everyone admired her beauty, nobody saw the scars hidden beneath her clothes. Nobody saw the nights she cried from the pain. Nobody saw the way she feared the next step her husband might demand. Home, things did not get easier. Jonathan became more demanding. "You must maintain this look," he told her often. "Don't let yourself go again. We cannot afford that." Miriam found herself trapped in a cycle. She had to dress perfectly, eat carefully, and always be camera-ready. Her life was no longer her own. She was living for Jonathan's approval, for the eyes of the congregation, for the image of perfection that had been built around her. But in the quiet moments when she rocked her baby to sleep, tears would fall freely down her face. She whispered prayers no one heard. "Lord, when will he love me for me? When will I be enough?" Months passed, and Miriam's body began to weaken. The surgery had been successful, but the long-term strain was heavy. She often felt dizzy, sometimes fainted, and her scars ached. One night she confessed to Jonathan, "I don't feel well. My body is not the same anymore. I am tired." But Jonathan brushed her off. "You are just overthinking. Keep your faith strong. The ministry needs you." "I need you." Miriam nodded, but in her heart she knew something was wrong. Her body was whispering warnings that her husband refused to hear. The church continued to admire Miriam, but no one knew the price she had paid. They saw beauty, but they didn't see the pain behind the smile. They saw elegance, but they didn't see the scars under the dress. Jonathan had gotten what he wanted, a wife who carried everything. But Miriam had lost something far greater. She had lost herself. The birth of their second child should have been another season of joy. A beautiful baby boy this time, a blessing that many couples prayed for. The congregation rejoiced with Pastor Jonathan and his wife. Gifts poured in, prayers were raised, and people celebrated what they called God's double portion on his servant. But behind the closed doors of their luxurious home, Miriam's world was crumbling. Childbirth had once again left its marks on her body. Her waist thickened, her stomach stretched, her face a little fuller. These were the normal marks of motherhood, marks of sacrifice, of love, of a woman bringing forth life. But to Jonathan they were flaws. "Look at you. he said one evening as she changed into her nightgown. His eyes scanned her body critically, the way a tailor examines a garment for defects. "You have let yourself go again. How can you stand beside me looking like this?" Miriam froze, her hands trembling as she adjusted her clothes. His words cut deeper than the scars from her first surgery. She wanted to scream. "I gave you another child. I nearly died giving birth. Why can't you just hold me and say thank you?" But her lips remained sealed. Years of living under his expectations had taught her silence. She only whispered, "I will try, my husband." In church, Miriam continued to play her role. She smiled, greeted people warmly, and sat beside her husband like the perfect first lady. The congregation admired her grace, unaware of the storm inside her. Women approached her often. "Mama, how do you keep yourself looking so radiant, even after children?" they would ask, their eyes filled with admiration. Miriam forced a smile and replied softly, "It is God's grace." But the truth was different. The smile she wore on Sundays was not the smile of joy. It was the mask of survival. Behind it was a woman who cried in silence, who longed to be loved beyond her shape and appearance. The nights of tears. When the house was quiet and the children asleep, Miriam's pillow became her confidant. She cried into it almost every night, soaking it with silent tears. She prayed prayers no one heard. "Lord, why am I not enough for him? Why must I change myself again and again just to be loved? Didn't you create me in your image? Didn't you call me beautiful?" Her heart ached not only from Jonathan's harsh words, but also from the emptiness of her marriage. She had a husband who could preach about love on the pulpit but could not show it at home. The pastor's hunger for perfection. Jonathan's obsession only grew stronger. The church was expanding, invitations were coming from other cities, and his image as a powerful man of God was rising. With this fame came pressure. Pressure to look perfect, to have a perfect family, to silence critics before they spoke. And in his mind, Miriam was the centerpiece of that perfection. One evening, as they prepared for a pastor's conference, Jonathan said firmly, "Miriam, you must do it again. The body lift. The first one was good, but now, after this second child, you must return to form. People are watching. They compare pastors' wives. We cannot afford to look less." Miriam's heart sank. Her scars from the first surgery still ached. Her body had never fully healed, and she feared going through it again. With trembling lips she pleaded, "My husband, please. I am tired. My body is weak. Can we not just let things be?" Jonathan's eyes narrowed. His voice grew cold. "Are you refusing me? Do you want to be the reason this ministry loses respect? Do you want people to laugh at us?" Miriam lowered her head. She had no strength to argue. She whispered, "I will do as you say." From that day, Miriam carried a heavy silence. She went about her duties, caring for the children, attending church programs, supporting her husband, but inside she was a woman walking in the shadows. Sometimes, while breastfeeding her baby boy, she would gaze at him with tears streaming down her face. "Will I live long enough to see you grow?" she wondered. Her heart longed for a simple life, one where she could just be a mother and a wife without the weight of perfection pressing down on her shoulders. But Jonathan could not see her pain. His eyes were blinded by ambition, by the desire for image and applause. Before the date of her second surgery, Miriam's health began to falter. She felt dizzy often, her body weak. The doctor advised rest and proper care, warning that her body was still recovering from childbirth. When Miriam mentioned this to Jonathan, he brushed it aside. "Doctors always exaggerate. You are strong, Miriam. You will be fine. Do not allow fear to make you lazy. This is for us, for the ministry." Miriam nodded weakly, but her heart trembled. She knew her body was crying out for rest, but her voice was trapped under Jonathan's authority. On the night before the surgery, Miriam tried one last time. They sat in their bedroom, and she looked at Jonathan with tear-filled eyes. "My husband," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Please. Beg you. Let me be as I am. Let me raise our children. Let me live. Is my life not more important than appearances? For a moment Jonathan was silent. He looked at her, and for a flicker of a second, it seemed he might soften. But then he shook his head. You don't understand, Miriam. This is bigger than us. The church must see excellence. You must do this. You have no choice. Miriam's shoulders slumped. She realized then that her cry had fallen on deaf ears. That night, she prayed longer than she had in years. She knelt by her bed and whispered, Father, if it is my time, forgive me. I have tried to please my husband. But Lord, I am tired. If I cannot live, please watch over my children. Let them never feel the emptiness I feel tonight. Miriam's words were never heard by Jonathan, nor by the congregation that adored her. But they rose to heaven, where the God who sees in secret heard the cry of a broken woman. And though her husband pushed her into another surgery, heaven already knew how this chapter of her story would end. For Miriam's silent cry was not just the cry of a woman. It was the cry of many women, wives, mothers, daughters, silently carrying the weight of expectations, praying for love, but only finding pressure. And the silence was about to be broken in the most tragic way. The morning of the second surgery arrived like a shadow over Miriam's heart. She sat on the hospital bed, her hands trembling, her lips whispering silent prayers. The air felt heavier than it had during her first operation. This time, her spirit carried a weight she could not shake. Her body was weaker, her soul weary, and her heart full of fear. She remembered the faces of her two children, their tiny hands reaching for her, their innocent laughter echoing in her memory. Will I come back to them? Will I live to raise them? Jonathan stood beside her, dressed once again in a fine suit. His voice was calm, even cheerful. This will be quick, my jewel. Just a small adjustment and then you will be perfect again. The ministry will thank you for this. Miriam looked at him, searching for tenderness in his eyes, but all she saw was determination. A tear rolled down her cheek. She didn't argue anymore. Her spirit was too tired to fight. The nurses came, and she was wheeled away once more. As the doors of the operating theater closed, Jonathan pulled out his phone and updated a few close church leaders. Pray for Mama. She's having a quick procedure. God will see her through. Inside the operating room, Miriam's heart raced as the anesthesia began to flow. Her last conscious thought was a prayer. Lord, if I don't wake up, please forgive me. Please protect my children. The machines beeped steadily at first. The doctors worked with skill, confident as before. But then something shifted. Her blood pressure dropped suddenly. Her heart struggled. Panic filled the room as the surgeons shouted orders. Her body is not responding, one cried. Prepare the defibrillator, another shouted. They fought for her life, but her body was too weak, too fragile from the strain of repeated surgeries and childbirth. Within minutes, the beeping flatlined. Miriam's silent cry had ended. When the surgeon walked into the waiting area, Jonathan stood to his feet with confidence. He expected the same good news as before. But the doctor's face was pale, his eyes heavy. I'm sorry, he said softly. We did everything we could. But she didn't make it. Jonathan froze. The words hit him like a thunderbolt. He blinked rapidly, waiting for the doctor to correct himself, waiting for the punchline that would undo the nightmare. But it never came. She's gone, he whispered. The doctor nodded sadly. Yes, I am truly sorry. Jonathan collapsed into a chair, his hands clutching his head. The reality crashed down on him. His wife, his jewel, the woman he had pushed to perfection, was dead. The church mourned deeply. The congregation wept as Miriam's coffin was laid before the pulpit she had sat near for years. Women cried openly. Men shook their heads in disbelief. She was so young. She was so beautiful. Such a tragedy. Jonathan stood to speak at the funeral, his voice trembling. He spoke of her beauty, her sacrifice, her loyalty. But inside, guilt gnawed at his soul. For he knew the truth. Miriam had not died from natural causes. She had died chasing his impossible expectations. She had died because he loved appearances more than her life. Her children were too young to understand. They reached out for their mother, confused at why she would not wake up. That sight broke Jonathan in a way no sermon ever could. After Miriam's death, Jonathan's ministry began to crumble. Whispers spread in the congregation. Some members questioned why their pastor's wife needed surgeries in the first place. Others began to wonder if Jonathan's obsession with image had cost her life. Attendance dropped. The once thriving ministry grew quiet. And Jonathan was left alone in the house that once echoed with Miriam's laughter. At night, he sat by the children's room, listening to them cry for their mother. He held his head in his hands and wept bitterly. For the first time in years, he felt the weight of what he had done. He had wanted a wife who could carry everything. But in the end, he carried her to her grave. Advam's story is not just a story of one woman. It is the story of many women who are silently pressured to be more, to look more, to sacrifice their peace, their health, even their lives, just to meet expectations that should never have been placed on them. To every man reading this, love your wife for who she is, not for how she looks. Cherish the marks of sacrifice on her body. They are not flaws. They are testimonies of love and motherhood. Do not let the world's obsession with perfection blind you to the treasure God has already given you. To every woman reading this, you are enough. You do not need to risk your life to be loved. True beauty is not in the shape of your body but in the strength of your heart, the kindness of your spirit, and the love you give to those around you. And to every couple, marriage is not about appearances. It is about love, respect, and support. Don't let society's standards destroy what God has joined together. Remember this. The graveyards are full of women who died trying to be what someone else wanted them to be. Don't let your life be cut short chasing perfection. Love yourself as God made you. Love others for who they truly are. Because in the end, what remains is not beauty, not shape, not outward perfection. What remains is love.